The following brief has been created with open source information found in books as well as on the internet. However, do take it with a pinch of salt, however, as some aspects have been kept secret due to said country's Official Secrets Act, or we just don't know, and sometimes the best place is actually Wikipedia. So with that said and done, let's get started with today's video. The Alaska class is a very large caliber cruiser built for the American Navy in the middle to latter parts of the Second World War. Up to the end of the 1930s, America had built heavy cruisers to the Washington Naval Treaty regulations of a heavy cruiser to not exceed 10,000 tons and to not possess a gun caliber larger than 8 inches. And she, like many countries, would stick to this, to some varying degree. Japan kind of didn't, but there's no surprise there. The Admiral Hippers would not really be treaty compliant, but the point they hit the water, Germany didn't really care about the treaty. The Italians came close to the treaty limits on normal displacement with ships like the Zara class and the Bolzano. The Royal Navy was only 400 tons over the treaty limits when it came to county class. America had the Pensacola, Northampton, New Orleans and Portland classes, and these will all be under 10,000 tons, which is good. But on approach to 1939, cruisers would start to go past 10,000 tons, and this is the time you would start to see the emergence of the supercruiser. American intelligence suggested that Japan was intending to build a so-called supercruiser in the form of the B-65. This would have been a monster cruiser. It was designed to be having a displacement of 35,000 tons, be armed with guns of 12.2 inches. The ships would have been constructed to be a cruiser killer, similar to that of the battle cruiser. These ships would also have been protected against 8-inch AP fire. But the thing is, this wasn't just an isolated case to the Imperial Japanese Navy. Oh no. The Kriegsmarine had the O-class battlecruiser as part of its Z plan. Over in Britain, they were starting to design the Churchill Special. However, this would be a 9.2-inch gunned heavy cruiser. Over in the Netherlands, they were designing a large cruiser. So you can kind of see why America wanted to jump on the bandwagon when it came to large cruisers. So based off this information, 9 designs would be called for. One would be a so-called 6,000-ton enlarged Atlanta to a 38,000-ton mini battleship with 12 12-inch guns. But the General Board wanted a ship to basically displace 25,000 tons each and have not much underwater protection. The ship would be designed as an enlarged Baltimore-class cruiser, but instead of having the same power plant, these ships would have the power plants from the Essex-class carriers, which were about to start construction. These ships would be ordered under the 2 Ocean Navy Act in September 1940, but these ships' roles would be changed ever so slightly. They would specialise in anti-ship roles for the use of high speed, as well as being used as a well-gunned carrier escort. The idea being that their large size would be an excellent case in war, as due to their pure mass, the ships could be quite durable, but they would also provide a large platform for air cover for an aircraft carrier. These ships would kind of be used as kind of insurance against, say for instance, a Japanese B-65 and its cruiser screen came sailing over the horizon. Before the ships would even be laid down, they would come under possible conversion to aircraft carriers. War was still half a year to a couple of months away, and America was feeling that they might not have enough aircraft carriers if America went to war with Japan. By 1941, America had 7 fleet carriers, 1 escort carrier, and Langley. Only problem with that was Ranger was in the Atlantic alongside Wasp, and Ranger wasn't much good in the Pacific, as she was slower than all the other carriers, excluding the Langley. In contrast, Japan, as an island nation, was based in the Pacific, and had 1 ocean in which they would operate in, and as such, the whole Kido Butai could be available for action at one point or another. They had Hosho, Akagi, Kaga, Ryujo, Suryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, and Zuiho. That is 3 light carriers and 6 large fleet carriers. The Japanese would have the advantage in available flight decks, so a study would be run to see if these ships were suitable for conversion. The Navy Board would look at other cruisers like the Clevelands and the Baltimores to assess if they would be better suited for said conversion. They even looked at one of the Iowa-class battleships, which were still on the drawing board by this point. But alas, they would choose the Clevelands. But this decision wouldn't come until the first vessel had actually been laid down. The vessels that would be ordered would be the Alaska, Guam, Hawaii, Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Samoa. Alaska would be the first ship laid down, but would also be the lead ship. She would be laid down on December 17th, 1941, 10 days after the fateful attack on Pearl Harbor. She and her sisters would be 246.5 meters long, 28 meter beam, and have a draft of 8.26 meters. They would displace 29,771 tons at standard and 34,253 tons at full load. Power plant would be 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers powering steam turbines, which would turn 4 shafts for a maximum speed of 33 knots and a cruising speed of 15. Range at cruising speed would be about 12,000 nautical miles, enough for a trip across the Pacific and back without refueling. Ship's complement would range between 1,517, 1,799 to a maximum of 2,251 officers and enlisted personnel. The weapons loadout would be as follows: 3 triple 12-inch 50 caliber Mark 8 naval guns, 2 in a superfiring power up forward, and 1 aft. These weapons were high velocity weapons, capable of 2.4 to 3 rounds per minute out to 19 nautical miles. A full breakdown of this weapon system will be covered at some point in a weapons briefing. 6 dual 5-inch 38 guns, 2 port, 2 starboard, and 2 on the centerline. These weapons are dual-purpose weapons, capable of shooting down air targets out to 8.6 nautical miles at a rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute. 14 quad 40mm Bofors medium caliber anti-aircraft mounts. Effective fire range with radar guidance is about 3.8 nautical miles, with a rounds per minute of about 120 from each barrel. Finally, 34 single 20mm Oerlikon autocannons, dotted in any spare space up top of the ship. This was the short-range protection against anti-air. The radars would consist of, at a guess, as there's no info set in stone about what these are, but I took this off NavWaps, the Mark 13 fire control radar for the main battery. Effective range is just under 20 nautical miles. The Mark 4 fire control radar for the 5-inch secondary guns. Effective range for these for tracking incoming bombers is just under 20 nautical miles, and for large ships, just over 15 nautical miles. The Mark 28 anti-aircraft direction finding radar, effective detection of targets and tracking them is out to 7.4 nautical miles, usually working in cohort with the Mark 33 and Mark 57 directors. SO-13 combined air and surface search radar, capable detection of targets at sea of 16 nautical miles and 35 nautical miles with an air target. The SK air search radar with an effective detection out to 162 nautical miles. There are possibly more radars, or I have briefed the wrong ones, so if you know exactly, please post in the comments below. The armour layout would be as shown in the background of this video. However, it was designed to go up against large, heavy cruisers. As stated by the belt armour, her belt armour is 9 inches thick, which proves it is proof against heavy 8-inch gunfire. Aviation facilities on board would be 2 catapults with an enclosed hangar amidships for 4 Kingfishers or Seahawk reconnaissance aircraft. So, all Alaska-class ships would be ordered on September 9th, 1940, with the first 3 being laid down and built by New York Shipbuilding Corporation in Camden, New Jersey. Alaska, as I alluded to earlier on, would be laid down on December 17th, 1941, being launched on the 15th of August, 1943, and commissioning on June 17th, 1944. Guam would be laid down on February 2nd, 1942, launching on the 12th of November, 1943, and commissioning on September 17th, 1944. Hawaii would be laid down on December 20th, 1943, and launching on November 3rd, 1945. She would never get completed due to the end of the war. However, there has been found plans for the ship to be turned into a large guided missile cruiser, but this fell through like the aircraft carrier conversions. Philippines, Puerto Rico and Samoa would never be laid down. In terms of service history, Alaska and Guam would commission in time to take part in the Second World War. However, they would be latecomers to the war. They'd be utilised for shore bombardment due to their larger caliber guns being able to pack almost the same punch as a battleship. Their speed would also be good and be used as a heavily armed carrier escort. However, none of these ships would escort the famous Enterprise. They would, however, escort the Franklin after she returned to Guam for repair from 2 bomb hits that she suffered in combat. Alaska would be utilised in the shore bombardment of Okinawa, as well as supporting the landings in the final months of the war, lobbing super heavy, high velocity 12-inch shells at unsuspecting Japanese defenders. Guam wouldn't be blowing the living daylights out of the Japanese army. She would in fact be in San Pedro Bay, becoming the leader of Task Force 95, which Alaska would join after she got bored of blowing massive craters out of a volcanic rock. This high-speed cruiser squadron would be sent into the Yellow Sea to sink the remnants of the Japanese merchant marine. However, all they would find is Chinese junks. After not sinking any junks, the ships would fly the flag around for the area, as well as showing freedom has arrived in the forms of 12-inch naval guns. After the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the war would officially be over, and the ships would still be in the east of Korean Peninsula. They would join Task Force 71, which was part of the 7th Fleet. The objective of this task force was to assist with the Allied occupation of the Korean Peninsula, and by September 8th, the landings were on. By December of the year, the 2 ships would be recalled back to the mainland United States. Here they would be put into reserve and mothballed in 1947. Alaska had been in commission for 32 months and Guam for 29 months. Not long, but their wartime career was about 13 months in the case of Alaska and 11 months for Guam. Looking at it that way, it's not very long. In 1952, there was plans to complete the incomplete hull of Hawaii as America's first guided missile cruiser, but this idea would fall through. Instead, there was another idea to turn it into a large command ship like the USS Northampton, but after a year and a half of that idea, the ideas were shelved. Hawaii would be struck off the Naval Register on June 9, 1958 and sold for scrapping in 1959. In 1958, the Bureau of Ships would prepare a study or two about if it was possible to convert Alaska and Guam to guided missile cruisers, similar to the lines of the refitted Clevelands. However, these refits and modernizations would prove too costly in a post-war environment, and so both ships would be removed from the register. Alaska would be sold for scrap on June 30th, 1960, and Guam followed suit on May 24th, 1961. Today, these ships are still making people wonder, are they large cruisers, or are they battle cruisers? What do you think? Post your comments in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Before you go, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest videos, as well as commenting, and if you want to, subscribe to the Patreon page to support the channel. All I need to say is, here's a sneak peek at next week's video.